Hey guys, welcome to the 10th section of this course. In this one, we will be creating a shop in order for us to spend the fishes we are getting from when we play game. So we're going to start with the most appealing part of this. And the first video about this section is going to be about the UI. So we're going to be laying down a UI for this. And just like we've done with all the other states, this is the flow we'll be using to create a whole new state for the game. We will create a new game state shop. We will create a new UI piece. We will create a new camera. We will pretty much redo the whole thing we've done for adding, you could say, chunk of content to our game. We will redo all of that, which is going to be a good reminder of everything we've done thus far. So the first thing I'll tackle is the most apparent one, and it's going to be the UI, as I've mentioned. So I'm going to go ahead and copy over, say, the canvas initialize for canvas shop. I went ahead and I copied it. We just put it here, and I'm going to open it up. Now, this is what I had in mind here in my other project. I have it running. It's a UI that's going to look like this. It has this scrollable rect with all of the items we have, a home button, and also the fish icon to let us know how many fish we have right now. As you can see, things have changed a tiny bit since my previous version, but let's go ahead and implement this one, and we will do so by what we have the canvas shop. We will do so by removing what we have thus far. We will leave one of these buttons. So I'll leave, for example, the shop in there because that's going to be our home button. So I'll go ahead, just rename that to home and switch the icon over. I don't know if I have an icon for home at the moment. We will just put the play button for the moment. But if you do have one, which should be the case, so in your artwork package, you might see a different icon for home. Because by the time you see this, art is going to be a tad different. What we can do is anchor this on the bottom right, and I'm going to give it a position of 300. Now, right above that, I'll create a new UI image, and that's going to be the fish count. And actually, you know what? Let's make this a container. So fish. I'll anchor this directly on top of the other one, so that should be 400, I believe. Yep. I'll give it a width of, we could do 550, or no, let's just do 500. And I'll remove the image on this one. This is just going to act as some sort of container. Maybe we could make it a tad smaller, so 125. And then on here, I will create a new image. That will be my fish icon, so I can put it here. Make sure I can preserve the aspect. Anchor it on the left-hand side. And make it a tad bigger, so maybe 150. That'll be my icon, and then the text next to it, which I believe is actually anchored directly at the right place right now, but just to make sure, I'll anchor it on the left-hand side and give it the exact same position X as this one. You know what? It can actually use the whole scale, like so. Okay. We can go in the center. This is going to be the fish count, which of course is going to be set manually in the code. Play around with the font, and that should be good. Okay, so we have our home button, we have our fish button, and then I'd like to have a text at the top here that says what is the hat I'm currently wearing right now, because they all will have a name to themselves. So for example, chicken hat, dog hat, whatever hat you'd like to put on top of the penguin. Okay, to do so, we will just create a new UI. That's going to be the hat name. And this one will be anchored on the top right. I can make this, say maybe 50% of the screen, so which is roughly 600. A height of 300. And I'll anchor this at the very top here. So maybe give it a padding of 50 or minus 100. Yeah. Hat name. Okay. So we're off a good start. However, we're gonna need to have a couple more things here. And the size of the font could be a bit bigger as well. I'm thinking we could actually move this a tiny bit. And the other axis, yeah, okay. Now, what I'd like to do is reserve the whole left side of the screen to have a scrollable rectangle, just like we saw in the example. And this is a little bit more hard than it seems because these are being instantiated at runtime. Actually, this whole shop, we don't know what's going to be in there in our UI. It's actually something I'll be loading from the addressable. So we don't exactly know how many hats there is. However, this list will be filled dynamically. Now, whenever you are creating this type of scrollable list, so something that can scroll indefinitely, you're going to need a couple of different things. You're going to need two objects. One that will act as a container, which we will create right now. So create empty, we can call it container. And just to see where this container is, I can also add an image component that will remove. But adding image component, I'll make sure it uses this whole size here. And my width for this one will be roughly 600. 600 fits perfectly fine. We might want to just move things around a tiny bit. So this container is good. Right here has a proper scaling to it. What we'd like to do on this one is add a mask. So by adding a mask, everything that goes beyond this point as a children will be cropped and we won't see it. So that's kind of a behavior we'd like to see in case we have the list. Well, we don't want to render everything. So if we have elements that are down there, we would not like to see them, visually at least. Now, another component we will need on top of the container is a scroll rect element. And we will come back to this one in a second because we don't have a container, a content container. Actually, we do. We are the container, but then we need another object beneath it. What is the content we will be scrolling? So we can right click here, create a new one again, call it content. And then I would just head back really quick to the container, drag and drop our content in here. We would like to be able to drag vertically, but not horizontally. So I'm going to remove that. And then we should be good to go. Okay. For the sake of not seeing the mask, I am just going to remove the show mask graphic here. We can and we have to leave the image here actually, so the mask uses something, but we don't have to show the mask graphic, so I'm going to remove that. Next up, we have the actual content. Now for the content, in order for us to see our modification, we will go ahead and we'll create a content element. So we'll actually create one of this hat container. And this hat container is going to be a button actually. So we're going to have a button. I don't know how big they're going to be, maybe 400 by 400. I realize that we have something that is 600 in width. Might want to remove the text as of right now. And we have our content here. One thing that is going to be very important for us to do is to save this, let's call it hat item, save this to a prefab. So under my prefab folder, I'll create a new folder called UI, and I'll just drag and drop this in here. Or maybe it's not a good idea to call it UI. Maybe it's a better idea to just call it shop. And then what we'd like to see in the future is have a couple of these just show up. As you can see, I now have 5 of them. So I have 5 hat item. And I don't know if you can see here, but as soon as we exit the mask, they're not being rendered. And that's the behavior we'd like to see. However, the way they're being placed is not the behavior we'd like to see. So going back on my content item, the one that is the parent for all of these hat items, I can put a grid layout group. And now you're going to see a resemblance of something that makes sense, but yet it still doesn't make sense just yet. You get to decide how big these are. We said we'd like to have them 400 by 400. Okay, we're off a better start. Then there is spacing we can put in between. Maybe you would like to have a spacing of roughly maybe 50 in between each of them. We also have the start corner. We can say, hey, yeah, you can be in upper left. That's good. However, our pivot point here is definitely not good. So we might want to take this content and just tell it to fit the parent. And we do so by going here and clicking on this. Okay, so we seem to have something here. For some reason, I do have some issues with the size of this object. So we could go ahead and create another thing, which is a content size fitter, and make sure our vertical size is the minimum size. This will actually expand our item depending on how many items we have. So it's gonna expand with the content we have. So if you have a look over here, on this white corner, that's the size of our content. And if I am to actually paste new item in there, you'll see it expanding with the content. And if we didn't have that, the content size fitter, you just wouldn't see that. And that's why we have it in here. And it's very important we do have it in here, else our scrollable list will not work. Okay. Now looking at this, do we need any type of padding? I believe we do. So it's just not directly stuck to the wall. We could go and do a little bit of padding on the left-hand side, so maybe 50. Top as well, so 50, or maybe even a little bit more from the top, so 100. And yeah, it's starting to look good. All right, so it's looking good thus far. If we are to actually play this, we are going to overlap with the initialize UI, but we might be able to just play around with this. Let's give it a try. Yep, as you can see, we have a nice scrollable rectangle that goes in both sides. If we are to add on top of this at runtime, why not? Because we are wild and free. It doesn't go back to the initial snapping. So that's exactly the behavior we'll be looking for. Maybe we want to add some padding at the bottom here as well, because I feel like this button is directly at the end of the screen and that is not something I'd like to see here. So let's give it a try. So 100 for bottom as well. Okay, amazing. So we're having something working great at the moment. Now, the next step I'd like to take is just decorate one of these so it actually looks good. So we can go ahead, take one of these items and maybe change the image of it for something that's a little bit more accurate. Now, I don't have many things that I could put in there. Let's give it this image for the moment. Might want to change it in the future. And then on top of that, I will need to add a little bit of text. I like to add text to say, hey, this is, for example, the chicken hat. And to do so, I will make sure my text expands on all the axes, fills the whole screen. I'll give it a center alignment, but I'll leave it at the top here. Maybe with a very small margin of 10 or something like that. And this could be the chicken hat, just as one example. Make this bold, always in caps because we are wild. And yep, that could do it. So that's the text. Or I could call it the hat name. Now do note that I'll only be editing one of them and then, we'll apply it like so. So it just affects everybody. And next up, the last thing we really need here is going to be an image. That will be the image of the hat. Now, at the moment, we don't have any image, but let's just assume that that's the image. And I can just put it in the center right here. So hat thumbnail or hat preview. And that is it. So let's override this, apply all. And we will actually make sure we save this. So that's saved properly here. And we will delete pretty much everything else. Okay, so I've deleted all the other items. I only left one, and I feel like that's not placed where it should be. So I don't know. Maybe the anchor is not at a proper place. And yep, that was it. So on my content item, I'm holding Shift and I'm clicking on top left because that's where I want my anchor to be. And then the rest should do the work. So the rest should work as it was prior to that. Okay, so we're actually going to end this right here for the sole purpose that we don't have any logic behind this. We don't initiate these properly. We have our text that needs to be set. So we have all we need in terms of UI, and we will soon deep dive into making this a little bit more dynamic using a different game state and a different camera, and also by setting the text on the screen. But for now, we have a good start, and I will see you guys in the next one. Last time, we created this piece of UI here for us to use for the shop. Today, we're going to be starting to define what is a shop item, what is a hat in this case. And to do so, we will take a slightly different approach just to explore something else with our scripting. And that will be, I'll actually create a section for for shop here under the script folder, and that will be a scriptable object. If you haven't used it in the past, it's something quite fun to use, so please tag along as we create a new script called hat, which is going to be our hat object. Now, as I open this one up, we will make it inherit something else than mono behavior. So we're going to make it inherit from scriptable object. Now, do note that by doing this, we don't have a hat that we can apply on the scene, for example. This cannot be the component of an object because it does not have the mono behavior, the whole system behind mono behavior here. It's going to be something that you're going to have to, if you want one, you're going to have to do a new hat instead of adding a component. So you're going to be doing something like that instead of doing a add component. I actually forgot how to do add component, but you get the gist of it. So public class hat scriptable object. And then we're actually just going to give it a data structure. We're just going to make this a data class, starting right here with a public string item name. And I'll leave this in caps, just like a scriptable object here. You'll see why I do that. Not a scriptable, just like a property here. You'll see why I do that in a second. We'll go with a item price. That's going to be int. So how many fishes is that hat going to cost? We're also going to give it a sprite, which could be a thumbnail. And we're going to give it a game object, which is actually going to be the 3D model that we'll put on top of our character. And that is all we will need here. Now, by inheriting from scriptable object, this can now become some sort of prefab, you could say. This can now become some sort of object that you manually spawn for your game. And it's common practice to have this for different items in your game. So, for example, the hat here works well. And in order to create it through the menu, because you can create it through the menu, you can add the create asset menu tag right here. And it also takes in a couple of parameters. You can give it a file name. So I'll do that. File name hat. And then we close off that bracket. It will now be part of my Explorer menu. So as I go here, if I right click, you'll see now that the create menu has a hat right here that we could click just to see what happens. And on the right hand side, you'll see that item name, item price, thumbnail, model are all sitting on top of this object right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete this one because that's not where we'll be spawning ours. In our case, when we have new hats, we will be putting them inside of the resource folder because it's something I'd like to load at when the game starts. And I don't know how many there is, and I don't want to have to drag them through a certain prefab, for example. So we could have a list of objects, a prefab that has lists of objects that we can just manually drag every time that we have a new one, or we could simply create a new scriptable object within the resource folder. I much prefer the second version of that. So what we're going to be doing is right-clicking on asset, making a resource folder, and make sure it is written the exact same way. Because of course, we're going to be using resource.load, which means it's going to be loading from this folder and it has to be written the exact same way. That being said, we're going to create ourselves a test hat. Within that, the name could be test hat with a spacebar. Could be worth $5, 5 fish, not dollar. Thumbnail for the moment, I'll just give it any thumbnail really. It could be just so I can see a change. I'm going to put the penguin icon. That's good. And then for the model, as I don't have these models right now, and I'm sorry, but you should have them. You should have these models at the moment, but I sure don't. So until I do have these model and you have them through the package as well, I'm going to use something else. For example, I could be using the 0. Okay, cool. Now that we have a definition of what a hat is, we will then move on to the next step, which will have to do with creating our game state regarding the shop. In there, we'll be able to load all those hats dynamically and also set the UI properly. And then after that, the final step will be to actually put the hat on top of the player. So that being said, we will end for this one, and we will see you in the next video in which we're going to do exactly what I said prior. I forgot. Okay, see you there. Welcome back to the shop implementation. At this point, we're going to create a new crucial piece of our game, you could say another piece to our puzzle that we do for pretty much every single add-on to your game, you could say, every module of your game. And that's going to be by creating a new game state. So if we head back under the script, we can find under the game flow, game state, a folder that has a bunch of states, but not the shop one. So let's go create it. Game state shop. And we are going to tackle this fairly quickly because we've done other states in the past. And make sure it inherits from game state. Now, if you guys remember, I'm going to open one other state, so maybe the def one, or the initialize right here. If you guys remember, we do have some override. Construct, destruct, and a couple of others I realized. So transition as well was supposed to be in there maybe. Oh no, construct, destruct, and update state. And we're going to make sure we override construct for this one. So we're going to start strong with a public override construct. And in here, most of the thing we do usually is just first turn on our UI and then maybe update some text and also change the camera. So whatever we have in the initialize here is pretty accurate for what we need in the game state shop. So we will need to change the camera. I'll leave that here for a second. We will need to update some text. Yeah, so the amount of fish we currently have, that's for sure. And we will need to set a UI to active. So that in mind, I'm going to create a new game object. And I've removed the using Unity engine, but we actually need it. So this one's going to be called the shop UI. And I'm going to make sure to enable it here when we construct. Also, the practice we've been doing thus far is that we disable that in the destruct. So let's make sure we also do that. Okay. Then the two other lines, I did it in the wrong order, but the two other lines are the following. We update some text. It's something that we also want to do here, so we'll need a reference to that. Text Mesh Pro UGUI. I'll make sure to use the TM Pro, Text Mesh Pro. And we can call this one total fish. Yeah, total fish. And then total fish is going to be equal to the following. Save manager instance save. Is that the total fish here? I believe it actually is. So we have what we need over here. That's perfect. And finally, the last line in our clipboard copy paste is the change of camera. And here you can see we changed to the camera initialize. That's not what we want. We want to change to the camera shop, which if you guys remember, we input that in here because we knew we needed it, but we never actually created a camera for that. So it's going to be up to us to go and set that camera. That being said, are we ready to do that right now? Do we have everything we need? We pretty much have everything we need. The only thing is we have no way to get to that state shop. So let's jump into the game state initialize, I believe. And here on shop click, we left that as a comment. We need to change the state to game state shop. We're already ready, so I'm really proud that we've did that now. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and go in my game manager, add my game state shop to it, and we'll set the references we need. So first up, the shop UI, so this one, and also the amount of fishes that we have, so over here. Whoops, I lost my reference, but it's right here. So that what I call icon here, and then that was the total fish. Okay, now that leaves me to wonder, we added a part of text here that maybe we don't want to have in here, so I'm just gonna remove it. Not gonna need that, just the text straight up will do the job. And yep, I believe we could also add a toString while we're here, why not? Okay, now let's give this a try, see if we can navigate to it. I'm going to disable the canvas shop for a second. Let's hit play, head over to the shop, and then you'll see we have our default camera set over here. The amount of fish is right here, and we have a very good start, so that works. We will need a action for when we press on the home button, and of course we'll need to populate the amount of we need to populate the shop. So that being said, I'm going to turn that off, and let's tackle one problem at a time. I think the first one we'll tackle is the camera, because that's the simplest one for us to do. We can head over here, toggle on the camera shop, and I'll just take this object as a selection. Then for the moment, we will just move around in our scene and maybe just angle it in such a way. And once I find a proper angle, I know our lighting isn't really that good thus far, and that's okay because we'll revisit that fairly soon. But once I have the angle I want in the scene view, I'll hit Control, Shift, and F. And I'll just keep hitting that until I find the proper angle. So maybe something like that will do the job. And I just realized, wait, we should be headed that way because our menu is on the left side. So maybe I want to have this type of angle with him. A lot of people playing Among Us today. Huh? Okay, cool. So that will do roughly because our shop is going to be all here. We have some text at the bottom. That leaves us enough space to see the hat. And we can fix the background here with some big mountains. Okay, I'll turn this off and just give it a quick look. Yeah, we zoom, we can look at the hat, and yeah, that's going to be great. Now let's address this button, the home button next. I'm going to head back under game state shop, and it's pretty much going to be the same thing as here. So you know what? I'll copy what I have in the game state initialize, and I'll put that right here on home click, and I want to move over to game state initialize. That's really all we needed to do, fairly fast. Now it's just a matter of hooking that to the button. So I'll head over to my, where is it? So that's my shop. It's totally fine. Where is my button? Here, it's actually called shop, should be called home. And this button, I'll add a on-click event. It actually, right now it actually uses the old one. Yeah, the old reference was here, so obviously we don't want to have that. But I'll just go ahead and change that for game state shop, and we'll put that to on home click. Again, I like to test out stuff as I do it, so it's fairly simple, fairly fast. Whoa, what's going on? Oh, I left the other one on. You don't want to leave any type of UI active because our state machine takes care of that. Okay, we can now swap in between the two, and it's fairly simple. What we're going to be tackling next is the chicken hat. The chicken hat and also pretty much all the other hat. Actually, I don't want to have a chicken hat. I'd like to see a test hat. So it's going to be a little bit more complex in this case because we'll have to create a new prefab for every single object we have, and then we'll have to dive into that prefab, change the text, and do all that kind of stuff. So prepare yourself for something a tad more complex. We're going to head over to our shop. Under the container, I have my content, and my content is the hat item. To make sure that everything is like 100% saved, I'm going to click on override. It doesn't ask me if I want to save again, so that's good. That's done. Press on delete. We don't want to see him anymore. Okay. Now that being said, we'll need some reference to that actual item here. So back on my game shop, I will create a new small section here called shop item, and I'm gonna have a public game object that's gonna be a hat prefab, and also a public transform that's gonna be my shop container, or you could say hat container. Okay, we'll need to assign these two. So back on my game manager, I'll drag and drop my content, so container content, I'll drop that under the hat container. And then let's find our hat item. Where did I put that? Under prefab hat item. And we're just going to drag and drop it right here. Now, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to make sure to create a list as well. So a private, you know what? I'm going to make this one public for now, but it's good. It'd be good if we just turn it back to private. It's going to be a list of hat that we're going to be loading at runtime. So public game object, we can do game object array and just call it hats. Why not? Now, what I'd like to do over here is use a start statement. I don't want to use the construct because I don't want this to be something we do every single time, but only once when the application loads up. So I'll be using should I do start? We're going to do awake actually. And in that awake call, I want to say that my list of hats is actually going to be equal to resources. Oops, resource, only one S, okay. Dot load, you want to load all game object at the following path. Now, we didn't assign a specific path for our object. We'll do that in a second. I'll just say hat dash And I believe that should work. I'm not quite sure, that's why I left it on public so I can see. Now with that in mind, it means that under my resource folder, I will have to create a new folder called hat. Did I just put a capital there? No, I did not, but I'll do it. Okay. And drop my hat in here and see if this works. Okay, it's now on 0, so that doesn't work. Okay, so I found my issue. It was a fairly stupid one. We're not trying to get a list of game object. We're actually trying to get a list of hats because that's what they are. They're hats and they are a scriptable object. So my bad about that. Once we have that, however, it would be time for us to populate the shop. So maybe you want to create something else. Maybe you want to create a private void populate shop in which you can send over your list of ads. But since we have them here in memory, we don't need to send them. And also, since I've checked out that this worked, I'm going to put it back on private, as it should be. Okay. Oh, and sorry, populate the shop. We'll do that in the awake as well. We don't want to do that in the construct, else it's an operation that we'll be doing only once. When it comes down to populating the shop, we have a couple of things. We have the hat container, we have the hat prefab, and we have the data stored inside of hats. So we'll need to do a loop here. For every single hats we have, so for I is equal to 0, for the length of hats, I++, we are going to instantiate, the hat prefab, will instantiate it inside of the hat container, like so. And now we're also going to make sure that we grab a reference to that as it comes out. We'll do a game object reference. So that actually works. I know some version of Unity that doesn't work, so maybe you want to cast as a game object. But that works. Okay, cool. And then once we have the hat prefab, this is where a couple of things need to be done. We will need to get the reference to the button. We'll need to get a reference to the thumbnail, to the item name, and then also the price. So let's do all that. So the button is here. We'll need a thumbnail. We'll need the item name, and we'll need the price. So all of these are things that we will need. Okay, let's start with the button. We can do a game object get component. The button is on the top level, so we can just say get component type of button, and I just put the wrong thing here. Hold on. We want unityengine.ui, so this one. Get the button, and then on top of that button, we're going to assign something, some sort of listener. So on click, add listener, and I just realized here we don't have any listener at the moment, but we'll create one called probably something like on hat click. And we will need to tell it which hat it is. So I'll just say hi in this case. Okay, so quickly, private void on hat click. That takes in a index as a parameter. Now we can go down here and just type in something of the sort. Hat number, hat was clicked. Since I'm not going to keep that for long. Now I'll just put the index next to it. Okay, so in terms of button, we now have a function being called every time we click on a hat. Next up, we need a thumbnail. Where is that thumbnail? I actually don't know. So we're gonna head into the game. I'm going to find my prefab. Here it is. On the top level, we have the image. We also have an image here. That's the background, so that's not the one we need. And then after that, we have the name. Not the one we need. It would be on the second children. So if we do a get child, it's going to be get child index 1. And then we can do a get image. So game object, transform, get child, the first one, get component. Now do note that this is an operation we only do once, so it's not going to be the end of the world if we have a couple of get component in there. And also it's an operation we do in the awake. So get component, we'll need to change its sprite for hat. Actually, wait. Hats at the index I dot thumbnail. Awesome. Next up, we will need the item name. Where was the item name stored? It was right here on the first object. So get child 0. Transform get child 0 get component type of text mesh pro UGY dot text, and then the hat dot item name. There we go. And finally, the price. Now we don't have the price in there, but let's just put it in here prematurely. It's going to be get child number 2. So we'll create another one for this. And it's going to be item price. Item price. That should work. Oh, toString because it's yeah. All right. So with that in mind, I can now head back in here. I'll just create a new text. So we have the hat name, the hat thumbnail, hat price, and it's going to be anchor at the bottom for the moment. Oh, you know what? Let's actually use the whole size of the square again, and I'll just modify the alignment of my text. And here you'll see a number pop up later on, so maybe 500. That's a little bit expensive. 5. I'll put 0 for now. Okay. That being said, I think we have everything we need. Let's give it a try, see if it crashes. Okay, we have a test at, we have a price of 5, and we have the proper name. That's exactly the behavior we'd like to see. Now, let me see it without too much, without the other one, the other UI on top of it. Okay, it looks a tad better. So obviously here we're gonna have a different thing in the future, a different thumbnail, a different name. And I'm just realized here that we might have to reorder things around because I'd like the text to be on top. Maybe the thumbnail should be at the very beginning. So let's make sure we reorder that right now. I'm gonna make sure the thumbnail is at the top. And do note that the way our code is set up right now, it does mess up things. So we'll have to head back and say, you know what, the thumbnail over here is actually get child 0 and that text is get child 1. And I think we've got everything we need. So do know that every time you're going to be creating a new hat, you can just come here and input whatever you wish. So yeah, that's pretty much it. To give this a try, I'm going to go ahead and copy it over and do a test hat number 2. I actually went in this folder, but don't worry, that also works. I'll just write in number 2. This one is 10. The icon is going to be, for example, the play icon, and we use a different model. Okay, don't worry about the name of your scriptable object because that's not the name we use, but just for this example, I'll just say 2 next to it. As we press on play, everything should have been loaded right now. We head to the shop and we have different data. So that's exactly what we should be expecting from this. The last thing we'll need is, oh, by the way, yeah, look down here as well. We have a problem. We have to address this problem before I was about to close the video. There's an actual problem. Crap. Okay, so if you see here, as I click, we get number 2. And we also get number 2 by clicking on the other one, which is not the behavior we'd like to have, actually. We'd like to see 0 and 1. What actually happens here is that complex to explain, because I have issues with this code as well. What really happens here is that on hat click takes in I as a parameter, but it's a reference and it's a reference to I, which means we run the full loop and it remembers what was the last value of I, which in that case, that was 2. For some reason, that was 2. I don't know why, but we'll have to figure it out. So what we have to do to overcome this issue is that we have to create a new an actual index here and set it every single time. And I don't know why it does that. If you actually know, well, I mean, there has to be a good reason, and I can probably Google it long enough. But if you know, then please let me know because I have some issues with that all the time. So I can declare int index and just say I. We'll have to do that directly in the loop. It's something that we'll do directly in the loop here. And I'll make sure to just replace this here with that. We could also replace these, like there's no issue with that. Now with that in mind, during the scope of this for loop, we've created a field that will be deleted by the end of the for loop, so well this iteration, and that's what's being saved here. Now with that in mind, I can go back, press on play again. That's 0 and that's 1. I don't know why we had a 2 earlier, I'll be frank, but I don't get the issues anymore. Now, the one last thing we will address before we head over to something else is the following. Under the game state shop, there is one more text, as you see here, the hat name that I'd like to change for whatever we currently have selected at the moment. And it's not going to work 100% by the time we end this video. However, we'll make it work in the next one. So we will add a new reference, and I'll just call it current hat name. And what we'll do is that we'll take this, and once we click on something, we'll just set the name of the hat. So we'll say something like dot text is equal to hat, wait, hats at the index I dot name. Okay. I just wanted to do that here. The reason I said it's not going to work 100% is because we are not setting that on the start. And the reason I'm not setting that in the start is because we don't know what hat we had previously. What is the player preference? We don't have this information. It's not being stored in the save data, but it's something we'll have fairly soon. So hat name is over here. I'll go under the game manager, drag and drop my new reference. And if everything works, we can call this video a day. And whoops. And so many people playing Steam tonight. That's crazy. Okay. Maybe I should be playing video games. And here it is. So we now have the test hat, and now we have test hat number 2. And I believe that is not the proper name for our hat, so I messed up again. Sorry about that. That's the name of the object, so these object, but it's not the name, but it's not the item name. That's what we're looking for. Name in this case was the name of the scriptable object, the one that is in our folder. We want to have the item name, which turns out to be exactly the same thing you see on top of it. So on top of the icon. There we go. We have something proper. Okay, cool. So I'll be ending it for now. In the next one, I think we're going to be looking at putting a hat on this guy and also start looking at the save data. Maybe just putting a hat on this guy. Yep. So I'll see you there. Cheers. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the shop. Last time we were able to populate these properly, but we had one issue that I didn't really see last time. So it's a small bug correction here. When we were to click on home, it didn't work anymore. Now, our problem here is because we have a private void awake inside of a game state here, but that's the base state. Now, under our game state shop, we have another awake, and oh, that used to be private, my bad. We have another awake here, and it actually overrides the last one. So that's our problem. So it overrides this one right here, and that's not cool. So we have a couple of ways to go about it. One, we could just put the line of code right here, and that would work completely fine. Or 2, we could swap that over to a start so it does not butt over the last one. Or 3, and that's the option I'll be using, is turn this awake into a protected function, which means here under my game state, which is the base object, I now have a protected void awake, which would mean that on my shop, I can override this. So I can say, oops, override. Oh, can I do that? It doesn't seem to let me do that. Oh, override point. Okay, my bad. And then from here, I can call the base.awake. Seems to be the plan. Oh, it doesn't work because my awake is not virtual, so my bad. Predicted virtual void. Okay, now we're good. Now we're fixed. Okay, my bad. And now with this fix, we should now have the reference for our home button, and I don't even need to test it because I know it's gonna work. Okay, that being said, we must now move on to putting hats on top of this little guy here. And to do so, I will go in my hat folder, which I did not create, it's under the shop folder, and I will create a new C# script called @logic, in which we will define all the logic regarding the @, including spawning them on top of the player and also swapping in between them. Now for that, we'll need a couple of things. First, let's do a cleanup. We will start with a private transform hat container. We will need this to be able to be set in the inspector, so I'll do a serialized field here at the top. That will be the point on the bone of the head. So that's part of our rig because our head is going to be moving around. Well, we need to put the hat at the proper place, so that's why this is here. Next up, we will need also a list of all the hats, just like we've done for the shop. So I'll grab this line, put it in here. Now I'll go back under the shop and I'll grab this as well. Lay it down in a private void awake. And now, like so, we should be able to get a reference to all the hat object. Then we should spawn them on top of our player. So private void spawn hats on the player, which we will do only once. And then we'll just toggle off everything. So in order to spawn hats, pretty much the exact same thing as we've done. So maybe in the construct, I'm taking back pretty much all the code that I've written over here, or written actually. So we'll do a for loop for every single hat in the loop. We will instantiate that hat, and that hat actually here is under hats at the index I dot model. So that's the big difference in between the two. And we'll put that under hat container. Oh, that's funny. I use the same name. And I believe that's all we need at this point. So maybe I'll just leave that on a single line. Oh, why does it not work? Probably because I assigned a field. Okay. We won't need that hat field for some reason. I don't know why I put it in there. Now, as I grab this, I'd also like to put that hat under a list. So a private game object list. List is part of system.generic, so make sure you include that. System collection generic. And let's just call it hat models. And I also instantiate the list right here at the top, so I don't have to do it in the awake. And you know what? I'm actually going to remove that line, and instead we'll just do a straight up add, like so. Okay, so now what happens is that we spawn these hats and we keep a reference to their model, because that's all we need really. We keep a reference to their model in the list, and the index will be just fine. So since we've added them in this order, the index will also match their proper hats index. Okay, so let's visualize this real quick. We have this script being put on top of the player. We assign the hat container, that's fine. And then he spawns all the different type of hats we have. Only their model. So right now that's the 0 and that's the 1. And that's pretty much it. It spawns both and it just doesn't work well because all of these hats are being stacked together. You know what? The best example I can give you is the actual real deal. So let's go under the penguin and I'll add my hat logic. Now let's deep dive into where is the head bone. Should be under the spine. And then what we have here, we have left shoulder, we have neck, head, and head top. So that's the one right here. I'll assign that in my transform, and let's press play. Okay, so our penguin has weird hats. It has a 0 and a 1. Yep, and if we are to play, he keeps them because that's him. He just likes to roll with that. Okay, amazing. So we have a good start at what's going on. Now it's time for us to actually decide which hat is being active right now. And we can do so by heading over to our script again and disable all the hats. So we'll do a public, we'll make it public in case we need to call it from somewhere else. Disable all hats. And all we have to do is run through that list. So again, another for loop. And we'll do hats model at the index I, set active, false. And finally, we'll do one more, public void select hat with the index. So int index. And we'll do the exact same thing, but of course, set to true, and the index is going to be put directly right here. I think that's actually all we need. Now at the beginning, let's just make sure we select at, say, number 1, index 1, which is the second one. Let's try not to be confused with it. When I run this, I should only have the 1 number on top of my head. Oh, wait, did I forget to disable? Yeah, I forgot to disable all the hats, so it's something we have to do here. Maybe in the spawn hats, right there. There we go. Or even better, wait, no, we'll have to do it in the select hat. So every time we select a new hat, we're going to have to disable all the other ones. And there we go. We only have that one on top of our head. Let's give it a try. So as you can see here, we have the two hats in the object. One of them is not active, and the other one, of course, is the one. Now we get to play with our nice little digit on top of our head. But that's a fairly good start. What we're going to be doing next is we're going to make sure we implement that in the shop as well. So the shop will now have a reference to the hat logic, and we'll be able to decide to change its hat. So that being said, back on the script, I'm going to head over to game state shop, and we'll give it a reference, a public reference to the hat logic. And with that reference, every time we select a new hat, so on hat click, we'll do the following. So hat logic, select hat with the index. I can also remove that debug.log because we'll have visual feedback now. As we assign this under the game manager, everything should now be linked together and working. So we start with a 1, and then if we go here, 0, 1, and we get to switch in between the two. That's great. That's exactly the behavior we'd like to have. Now, the next thing we'll be tackling is that notion of price over here. And what we will be doing is deduce the price based off this and also keep track of what has been sold and also what has been unlocked thus far. So it's something that we'll have to play around with in the save data, and that's also something we'll do in the next episode. So thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey, welcome back to one more episode about the shop. Last time we were able to get these hats on top of our head, being equipped by the player himself, and today we're going to be looking at keeping that information over time. So we're going to be keeping two new values. One, what is the previous hat we've had when we last played the game? And second, which hat have we unlocked thus far? Because chances are you have to buy them once, and you don't have to buy them every single time, basically. So we're going to start right off the get-go with our save state. We've just mentioned that we're going to need to be keeping new data over multiple play sessions, which means we're going to have to go in here and put those. Now, it's going to be fairly simple for a start. We're going to be keeping a new int that we'll just call current hat. Could call it current hat index. It's a little bit more accurate. We just need to keep some sort of preference. Which hat did you have last time that you played the game? Now, the next information that we'll need is which hat have we bought thus far? And to do so, the option I've decided to opt for, because there's going to be multiple hats, and of course you don't want to have multiple different fields in here, is to keep those inside of a byte array. So public byte array, which is of course a serializable type, and I'm going to call it unlocked hat flag. Why flag? Because it's going to behave just like a C# flag. And it's just going to give us a bunch of 0 and 1. And from that, you can determine, okay, well, the first one, you don't have it. The second one, you have unlocked it. The third one, nope. Fourth one, yep, and so on. Now, when we create the save state initially, we will need to actually assign a current hat value, so current hat index. And we can put that on 0. And we can also make sure we always unlock the first hat, so at least the player has one of these that he can try out. And actually, the one that he could try out is actually a hat that could have nothing on it. So that could be very much possible just to create an empty game object and just put that as a prefab for the model of the hat. And that's what I'm thinking of doing here. So current hat index could be equal to 0. 0 would be a pointer to a hat that is basically nothing. So we could call it none. And that seems quite accurate. Now, when we start the game initially, I like my unlock hat flag to be, or at least the index 0 to be unlocked. So being able to swap back to the hat that is none. We have one problem over here, however. Our unlock hat flag array is not defined how big it is right now. And the way I'm going to be getting around this is, well, we have two ways we could do. We could do a dynamic resource.load. So we could do a resource.load and then look up how many items we have in that list and then send that over to the save state, maybe as a parameter. So hat count here. That's one possibility, or we could just define it here at the top. I'm going to be defining more than I actually need. So here's what I'll do: a private const int hat count. And we could go for like 12. And if we go beyond 12, then of course we can increase that number later on. So you'd be going for 8, 16, 32, and so on, just to give some nice values in terms of bytes. But if you know what this is going to do, a int is also a serializable type. And this is now going to be stuck inside of our save state. And maybe we don't want that. Actually, we don't want that. We don't want to have this arbitrary number here put in our save state. There is an argument you can say, hey, don't serialize this. And it's called non-serialize. And by doing this, we extract this value. This is now just part of the logic of the save state. It's not part of the actual file we're going to serialize. And now with this, I can go down here and say, hey, you know what? Unlocked hat flag is equal to a new byte array of hat count. And now in terms of data, we should be good to go. Now for testing purpose, I'm just going to head down here and copy that and also unlock the second hat. So we're going to have 2 hats total when we create a new game. And to make sure I actually don't reload the old data, because now we're going to run into corruption issues. We have a different save state. That's corruption. Like you're going to have issues reading the previous save state. So I'm going to head over in my folder, delete the data.ss, press play once more, and now save file not found. Let's create a new one. Okay, that sounds good. Now, what I'd like to do next is head inside of that logic here, the game state shop logic, and maybe change the preference. So change the current hat flag. That could be the next step. So let's go ahead and do game state shop. And when we click on the hat, we want to say save manager instance save. The current hat index is going to be equal to I. And we can also save once everything is done. So save manager dot instance dot save like so. So once we click on the hat, we change the index and then we save that again. Okay. Now with that in mind, we're going to be able to change the different hat index we have. So we're going to be able to to change the current hat index inside of our save state. But that doesn't do anything right now. We don't actually use this value anywhere. So go ahead and grab this. We're going to head over to our hat logic, and we are going to select the proper hat when we launch the game. So here in my await call in the hat logic.cs, I'm actually going to say the following. Hey, select the hat at the index that is defined within my save state. Okay, so we have a bit of a confusion here. Both of them are being spawned at the same time. So what could be the problem? The problem in this case is that we're doing that in a await call, and also the save state is being created in a await call. So maybe we want to swap over to a start call for the hat logic. This is just like a race in between those two, and the save state didn't win. Okay, so right here we see the 0. If we are to click on the 1, and then apparently this has saved, I'm going to turn this off, turn it on again, and we have the 1, and we can just switch in between them, and our preference is save, and that's amazing. That's exactly the behavior we'd be looking for. Okay, the next thing I'll do is I'll actually copy my test hat over, and I'll create the none hat. So none hat, or no hat, whatever you feel like. This could be just called none, has a price of 0, and the shop icon could be literally nothing. I think that's gonna work. And the hat model, none. I don't think that's gonna work, however, but let's give it a try. Okay, the variable model of hat has not been recognized, and that's probably because there's nothing, right? Yeah, so we're going to need to have a hat that has nothing for our script to work. And for that, I'll just create an empty game object. I'll call it no hat, and I'll drag and drop it inside of the prefab folder under the shop. With that in mind, we can now head back to our none hat and drag and drop this here. Now let's see if this works. Doesn't seem to have any issue thus far. And then let's switch over to none. None is good. I clicked on none. Then I'm going to reopen the game, see if it doesn't appear. Yep, so we're good. So no hat at this point. Of course, the thumbnail is wrong here, but do not worry about that. We'll actually create a 1x1 alpha, and that will do the job. But as you can see here, the rest work just fine. The next issue we could be tackling here would have to do with buying and also limiting the access for other things we haven't bought. Like for example, when we create our save state, we have two things, right? We have the one at the index 0, which is none, the one at the index 1, which is this one, but we shouldn't be able to click on this one because technically, according to our byte array, which is 1, 1, and then 10 zeros, that's actually more, it's 14 zeros, this one we shouldn't have access to. And that's what we're going to do right here. So we're going to restrict, the last hat. Any hat that we don't have access to, we're going to restrict it. And we will do that over here. I'm actually going to wrap up all of this in a if statement. And we're going to say if save manager instance save current hat. Actually, no, that's not it. It's the unlocked hat index. Unlocked hat flag. If that at the index I is equal to 1, then we can proceed with this code. Now, if we don't have that, we need to have a else statement here. Else if, and I'm doing an else if because there is something more in between here. If we don't have it, can we buy it? And then that will happen here. Or else, don't have it, can't buy it. So here, we can just do a debug.log, not enough fish. So this should work, right? This should work for just changing it if we need to. Then we have the else if statement that looks for the amount of fish you have and also the price of that hat. And let's have a look at it. So we do have an index for hats. So we have hats at the index I, dot price, item price. If that is smaller or equal to our current amount of money, which should be stored under our save state, so fish, then we're going to go ahead and buy it. And now when we do buy it, a couple of things happen. First, we take our fish count and we do minus equal the item price. That's fairly normal. So we deduct the amount of fish we have with the price. Then we also need to change the unlock flag. So this value here, we need to make sure this is now on 1. So we have toggled this one on. Do we need to do anything else? Yeah, we could go ahead and do this and also save. So when we buy, we deduce our price, we toggle on the good boolean, we change the current hat name, we change the hat, and then of course, we make sure to save. Let's see if this works. And you know what? I'd like to not have any fish. So I think I don't have any fish, right? Because we just reset, yeah, fish 0. So if we are to go here, we can get this one, that's fine. 1 as well, because I unlocked it. I hard unlocked it directly in the save state. And then this one, which costs 10, we don't have enough fish. And if we were to play the game just a tiny bit, just to make sure we have 10 fish, which I just realized is going to take more than 5 seconds. All right, so here we are with now a total amount of 10 fish and a very high score. Oof, my biggest score thus far. Let's make sure we go here. 10 fishes, click here. We've unlocked this one. And if I am to go back, we also have 10 fish. We'll need to reset our text over here as well. But let's just assume that this is fine. We're going to turn this off. And we don't have the proper fish on our head. That's annoying. But it is unlocked, however. So we had two issues. First, the text did not update, and second, when we joined back, we didn't have the right hat on our head, which means we were missing this line here. Okay, so that also sets our preference for next time we load. And now we need to set the text, which I believe we do over here. So we'll just grab that line and just set it again. That's all we need. So we've just fixed that issue. To show you it is fixed, I'm going to go ahead and redo what I just did. But I'm going to reduce the price of that hat because it's right here. I can do that. It's legal, right? Hat price is going to be 2. I've deleted the save file, so we're starting fresh. We have a high score of 0 and then a fish count of 0. I just need to collect 2 of those. So 1 and then 2. Run into a wall. And we have a total of 2 fish, so I can choose this one. I can choose this one. And I could technically unlock this one as well. And here it is. Fish count has been updated. We now have 0 fish. Turn this off, turn this on again. And we have the right one on our head with the right fish count. All right, so that's good. I see 2 more problems with this very specific shop. And those problems are the following. We've just entered the shop and we have a hat name here. Obviously, that's not what I'd like to see. And also, I see the price of things I've already bought. So it's time to head back. This one should be a simple fix. So hat name should be a fairly simple fix. When we join here, we populate the shop and we could actually, let's see, select hat. What happens when we select the hat? Oh, so here it is. That's the name we wanted to change. So current hat name.text. This is what we have to change. Let's grab this line of code. Head at the top here, maybe in the awake, and we'll have to change the current hat name.text. Change that to the hats at the index of our current hat index. And just like so, we should have fixed our first problem. Now the second problem comes from the populate shop. So when we lay down our buttons, assuming that we have here the price, assuming that we have unlocked the thing, then we want to set that to maybe nothing so it just doesn't show up. So here we'll have to do an if statement. If save state or save manager dot save state, the unlocked flag I is equal to 0, that meaning it is not unlocked, then we can change that to give it its proper price. Else, let's go ahead and just take this line of code and make sure it's empty. And I think we're good to go now. Oh, we got a null reference exception. What could this be? Oh, again, we're doing something in the awake call, and the base state has not been awakened, you could say. So this is something we could move over to the construct, which is being ran on the start. All right, so this one is a bit tricky because the way our save state work, it works on the same exact awake call as everybody else, and maybe that's definitely not the best way to go about it. Maybe we wanted to have a preloader of the application that would load the save state and then load everything else. But I think we've been able to make it that far without having that logic in place. So what I think I'll be doing here is I'll just move these two over to the construct, and to make sure they're not being called every single time, including the resources. So basically, I'm getting rid of the whole awake. Let me just move that in the proper order. To make sure they're not being called every time, we can just have a boolean that checks that. So private bool is initialize. That's going to be equal to false. If initialize is equal to false, then we're going to run these 3. And now that's going to become true. Okay. Now this way it's going to be created once we enter the state. And we'll have access to the save state at that point. Oh, and I just realized that I put that in the wrong order here. So you'll want to put these 2 here at the top first. Actually, these 3. Because we were using hats in there, but hats is being defined at this line. So I had a no reference error when I booted the game. All right, now that being said, I'm going to click on shop, and now we're in here. And we don't see the text beneath any of them because we have all of these hats, which means we're now ready to do a clean test by heading over to our save state, removing the additional flag that we've unlocked. Then back into our folder, delete the data.ss, and let's give this a try. Okay, so save file not found. That's totally fine. We're gonna head over to the shop, and we have none. We can't select this one because we don't have enough fishes. We can't take this one because we don't have enough fish. Let's give it a try in the game. We just need a total of 2 fish, so bear with me. And we've got 2. I'm gonna just jump into this rock. Yep, let's head back. Can't unlock this one, not enough fish. But however, I can get this one. Oh, and I just realized that we'll need to, when we do unlock, we'll need to remove this one here, change the text back. And if we are to go back, yep, the text is still here. Okay. But now it's gone. Okay, so we have access to these 2. Okay, so final mistake we have to correct, hopefully final mistake we have to correct, is under the game state shop. And once we do unlock something, so in these line of code over here, once we do unlock, we're going to have to change the text. So I'll take this line of code. And what's going on here? So we don't actually, we actually never save these game objects that contains the that contains these hats. So the way we can access it is through this hat container by doing the following: hat container get child, and we get child at the index I because that's the index. It's the same index as which have been spawned. And that's the first one. And then we can copy the rest of this text. So hat container, get child 1, transform get child 2. We take the text and we remove it. There is probably a good way to clean up this code. I'm just saying. With that in mind now, I'm going to give it a quick try and cheat a tiny bit. I'm just going to say that my fish count is equal to 10. Delete my data.ss once more. I'll boot the game, and then let's give this a try. So I have no ads. I could be choosing this one. The text, as you could see, disappeared. And we also got our text updated here and here. So I'm going to choose this one. And the behavior I'm expecting to see is that this text is going to disappear. I'm now going to have 3 fish. And the text is going to change here at the top. And it did. So everything updated properly. Quit the game. I should have all the hats and 3 fish. Yep. So we got it working. All right. So that actually wraps it up for the shop. Believe it or not, we're done with the shop. And it leaves us with 2 more sections of this course. One has to do with monetization. So we'll have to put some ads in there for when we die. That's going to be the next section. And we'll wrap up everything nicely by polishing everything. Our game doesn't look very good right now. The lighting is extremely bad, especially from this angle. We don't have the proper icons. We don't have the proper hats. We are missing content, and the gameplay chunks are kind of bad. So a lot of things to fix, and you'll see it take all place in the next 2 sections, which will also wrap up the first part of this course. So guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next section. Hope you're ready for some more.